Temkin. And there might be, Ari, at least one, maybe two Big 12 players at the Heisman ceremony with Travis Hunter, and who knows if Shedeur gets in there too.
Yeah, Smokey, probably should be two, maybe three. You mentioned Shedeur. How about the running back for Arizona State we saw all season?
Skattebo, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this was certainly something that we talked about last week in the lead up to the game. But, I mean, he is the first player at the FBS level to have 1,500 yards rushing and 500 yards receiving in a season since Christian McCaffrey did it. And he's the first player in the history of the Big 12 to do it. So, we think of him as being this, gritty, tackle breaking running back. And yet he's also over 500 yards receiving, shows his dual threat ability. He's been phenomenal. I'd argue, despite the fact that I think Travis Hunter is going to win the Heisman, Cam Skattebo has been the MVP of the Big 12 this season, and hard to argue against that after what he and his team did on Saturday against Iowa State at AT&T Stadium.
Absolutely. So, Ari, the SEC got a little tiny taste. I mean, they still got 3 teams in the playoff, but they got a little tiny taste of reality this week. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, I suppose, I think, a big part of what's missing from the conversation is why wasn't BYU more of an argument, again, considering not just the fact that they beat the team that got in, but just the resume at large. And, we were able to catch up with Brett Yormark at Big 12 Media Days when, the commissioners are going to be getting together here and sort of going over the first year of the playoff and, going through the processes. And my guess is, Brett Yormark will share with them the perspective of the Big 12, which is not great in terms of, how come the conversation wasn't shaped around multiple teams. And, I think what's maybe most interesting about this whole dynamic is, the role that the Big 12 plays in, the future of it. And, we know we're going to be getting expansion. It looks like 16 potential teams in 2026. Would that be automatic bids? And then how much will the Big 12 be counted on to be part of these discussions? Or will it just be Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti themselves figuring out what it is? And, how much does the Big 12 actually have say in this whole process? So I'm kind of interested to see how that plays out. I don't think anybody ends up happy here. Obviously the SEC is not happy. Greg Sankey's not happy. And so that will lead to some immediate changes. I can't imagine otherwise. But yeah, I mean, to your point, pretty wild to think that, the Big Ten gets how many teams in, but the SEC does not. Look, the SEC has good representation. We'll see how this thing shakes out, but it just didn't make any sense for Bama to be in here other than it being Bama and that they pretty much monopolized national championships, which seems like over the course of the college football playoff and really the end of the BCS era.
Ari, we're going to have plenty of time to talk about the SEC whining or the Big Ten having this opinion or the ACC or the whatever. You mentioned at the time. Let's talk about the Big 12 game. Let's talk about the game that made this playoff situation the way that it was. And you talked about Cam Skattebo there. How shocked were you by what you saw on Saturday? I mean, that was a bludgeoning of a very proud Iowa State program there on Saturday. I did not expect that. Arizona State winning, okay, sure, could totally picture that. But I didn't expect it to unfold that way. Did you?
No way. I mean, I picked Iowa State to win the game, and I was pretty sure that Iowa State's defense would be able to match up pretty well with Arizona State's offense. I thought without Jordan Tyson, that would put them in more third and long situations, which would not allow them to run the football as effectively. And yeah, I mean, it was like the first play from scrimmage, Skattebo rumbled for 50 yards, and that was it. He had the 53-yard run with 1 minute left in the first half of the game at 17-10. That led to another touchdown, 24-10. And then there were 3 turnovers by Iowa State in the second half, all consecutively. And then all of a sudden it's 45-10. And yeah, I mean, it was hard to believe. Yeah, I think the thing that maybe I didn't put enough stock into was the growth of Sam Leavitt over the course of this season. Leavitt went from being kind of a heady gamer, making the right plays with his legs, always knowing what decisions to make, and making plays with his legs, but questionable with his arm, to becoming a legitimate dual threat quarterback. I mean, what we saw, he had a rushing touchdown early in this game. We had a 4th and 8 run that he ran for a first down in this game. So he's just such a smart quarterback. I think the ability to find Guillory, he found, new weapons. It was something that Kenny Dillingham talked to us on the field at AT&T Stadium before the game with, basically saying like, we don't need one guy to make 7 plays up. We need 7 guys to make up 1 play each. And that was exactly what happened. I mean, they had multiple players, Stovall, that had not really made a huge impact over the course of the season. That, Malik McClain is a guy that didn't have a catch all year, was still redshirting and had a big play in this one, a 43-yarder. So I think Dillingham, everything he said came to fruition, and I think a big reason for that was Sam Levitt. I mean, look, Skattebo is 100% their MVP. I mean, he paced them, and again, it really opens up your playbook offensively when you've got a guy like Skattebo and the defense has to account for. But I thought the growth of Sam Levitt, his ability to become kind of a dual threat quarterback, be as good running the football as he is passing, is something that really, he turned on in the second half of the season.
When you look at the Big 12, Arizona State gets a number 4 seed. There were thoughts they would not get a first-round bye. They forced themselves into this picture. They basically came from way back like a horse in the final turn, right? Down the stretch they come and forced themselves into what is a first-round bye and a team to be reckoned with, whether it's Clemson or Texas in round 2.
I suppose, maybe. Or was it more that Clemson beat SMU and that opened up that opportunity? I mean, look,
yeah.
Kenny Dillingham seemed pretty excited, and there's nothing to indicate that he wouldn't be. I think everybody out of Tempe is very excited, but I still think the Big 12 got hosed. I still don't get why Arizona State wasn't the 3 seed ahead of Boise State. I mean, we're talking about resumes. I just don't know how you don't look at Arizona State's resume as better. It's crazy to me that a group of 5 school would find itself in the top 3, as opposed to even as crazy as it seems for the top 4. But look, I mean, this is a big deal because it takes away a home game opportunity for Arizona State. I mean, I think when we left AT&T Stadium on Saturday, it felt like Arizona State had done enough from a style points perspective to put themselves ahead of Boise State and get to that first round bye. The fact that SMU lost is ultimately what swung the bye in the situation for Arizona State in the Big 12, but they've got to go to the Peach Bowl now as opposed to playing a home game at the Fiesta Bowl, which would have been a lot more exciting. You get either the winner of Penn State and SMU as opposed to Texas and Clemson. It just, to me, it would have been an easier draw, and you get the home game. So, yeah, I mean, it's great that the Big 12 was able to get the bye. We thought down the stretch they wouldn't be able to get the bye. I still think they should have been ahead of Boise State. Again, there's nothing, and we would have been having the same argument had SMU won. We would have been wondering why Arizona State didn't jump Boise State for that final bye, because their resume far exceeds that of Boise State's. Boise State did not win a Power 4 matchup. I get that they won all of their games with the exception of the one to Oregon, but they're getting more credit for a loss to Oregon than Arizona State seems to be getting for the wins that they had. I mean, Arizona State to beat BYU and to beat Iowa State, those are 2 wins well beyond anything that Boise had this year. So it's still tough for me to be happy about it because, again, I thought home game at the Fiesta Bowl would have been a much more appropriate prize for Arizona State. But, it is what it is, and I think this is something that will certainly be addressed by Brett Yormark when the commissioners get together here in the next few months.
Ari, a lot of coaching news in the Big 12, surprisingly enough. I mean, over the weekend, even though one job not filled yet, one job was with Scott Frost. One job didn't open and then close immediately with Utah since they already picked Kyle Whittingham's successor. And then another job felt like it was going to open up on Friday. I mean, it didn't look like that was going in the right direction. But Mike Gundy stays. They've hired Todd Grantham. Your thoughts on the coaching buzz and events around the weekend of the Big 12?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start with Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State. It was surprising to me. I mean, I get it was a horrible season, but I mean, this is a guy that was in the Big 12 championship game a year ago. And, this is a guy that routinely has 10, 11 win seasons for Oklahoma State. I mean, you look at their history, Oklahoma State football history, they have one 10-win season that wasn't with Mike Gundy at quarterback or coach. I mean, you're looking at multiple 10, 11-win seasons, all occurring with Mike Gundy at quarterback or coach. I mean, he is Oklahoma State football. Now, that doesn't, preclude him from potentially losing his job and everything else. But, I mean, one off year, granted, it was a major bad year, but one off year, a year removed from playing in the Big 12 title game, and that was enough to potentially lose him his job. So I just didn't like the way that was handled. For me, if I'm Oklahoma State, I certainly would look at Gundy as being on the hot seat heading into next year if the same situation plays out. But again, based on what he's done, man, it's a cold world. And the Todd Grantham hire is like the complete opposite of the Brian Nardo hire, right? I mean, now you're going with the known commodity, a 58-year-old who's been around big-time college football in the NFL for a long time. Not exactly a Brian Nardo hire. So, he clearly learned and is overcorrecting to the other direction when it came to his decision there. At UCF, I get the Scott Frost thing. This is not the American Athletic Conference. This is not 2017. So, Frost opened up his press conference talking about, I hope nobody expects us to be undefeated. And I think that's the right expectation to set off the bat because of how good they were under Frost in the American Athletic Conference. But again, this ain't the AAC and this ain't 2017. A lot has changed in the last 7 years since the last time Scott Frost coached at UCF. So, this will resemble a job for him that's closer to what he had at Nebraska than what he had at UCF. I get that it's the same school, it's the same location, but nothing else is the same about it. So I'm very curious to see who he hires from a staff perspective. I think his OC and DC hires become huge. Who he hires, in the strength and conditioning, we know the importance of the strength and conditioning coordinator as well. So I think those 3 jobs are 3 I'm going to be looking out for. But I can't really give you an opinion on the hire. I'm kind of in the middle of it. My first thought was, really, this is where they're going. They think they're going to recreate the success they had 7 years ago in a different conference. So I just hope the mentality is completely changed because it's a different reality, and not just the move up in conference, guys, but the fact that you're now overseeing a program that has to make budget decisions, that there's a lot of money involved here. So there's just a lot that he's got to account for that I think makes it more closely resemble what he had at Nebraska than what he had at UCF previously. So we'll see. And then, West Virginia, it looks like they're really hot and heavy on Andy Kotelnicki, the former Kansas offensive coordinator. I'm a big fan of Kotelnicki's. Obviously, from an offensive perspective, the guy is a genius. But I'm a big believer from a coaching staff point of view in, find me an alpha that can delegate at the college football level. Like, schemes come and go. You can find great coordinators to run the best schemes. To me, I'm not going to hire a coach based on how good you are schematically. I want a coach that understands how to delegate, understands leadership. I want a true alpha that understands how to delegate. So, and I'm not saying that Kotelnicki's not. I'm just simply saying, what we've seen from him is just an offensive genius, but does he have the other components to be successful?
Yeah, I think with Frost, it's a fun offseason hire. Like, that, the excitement the next few months will be great, but the actual, what it looks like next year on the field, that's going to be the true test for sure. But the fan base seems to be fired up, and that's something they certainly haven't really been in a while now. The transfer portal's going hot and heavy, a lot of decisions as well. We clearly can't cover everything, but how about Jaylen Daniels deciding to come back for another season? Your thoughts as a Jayhawks fan as well to see JD6 making the move to be back in Lawrence next year?
Yeah, it'll be funny when he comes back because it'll be similar to, I think, some of these other players that have been around seemingly forever. So I think he'll get that treatment of like, oh man, this guy's still there, and especially considering after, his first year as a starter when KU won 8 games and went to a bowl game and it was a huge surprise story. There were some that felt like he might leave and go to the NFL. So to go through the injury, miss a season, and then come out the other end still playing for KU is sort of surprising. I think in many ways, this is a big reason why KU decided to hire Jim Zembrowski from on staff already, who's been a long time assistant with Lance Leipold. Because of Jaylen Daniels returning, they probably want to keep a lot of the offense the same. They're going to lose some of their weapons on the outside. So it'll be interesting to see how they replace those guys through the portal. I also wonder what this does behind JD6. Cole Ballard is a guy that's Chris Ballard's son, the general manager of the Colts. I liked what I saw from him as a true freshman walk-on a few years ago. Now, does he look at potentially going somewhere else to try to get a better idea to start? So I wonder, too, what it does kind of be down the line in terms of who might have been in position to potentially take over. But obviously, it puts KU in a much better position going into the season next year. You hope that the cobwebs that he had to shake off at the beginning of the year will be completely gone by the time the season starts. But he wasn't flawless this year. And while we did see him turn a corner at the end of the year that helped them win some of those games, he did have some turnover issues in that Baylor game. So, I think going into this next season, there's going to be some major question marks about KU in terms of what they bring back and what this offense is going to look like. But it certainly helps to have an experienced quarterback back. There's no doubt about that.
Ari, we have evidence. We now have 12 teams left to try to win a national title, including Arizona State. And then, of course, a lot of the bowl games. We're going to break down the bowl game bids and all that a little bit later in the show. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you being a part of the show today.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. Take care.
Ari Temkin, Big 12 Radio on TuneIn, with us on 365 Sports.